Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Michael. Michael, you touched on bringing order, and I'm now just fully stimulated with thoughts that I now need to put into some order for this next 5 or 10 minutes. So from the last workshop, I've been thinking about human connections, how we make our justice system more human, and all conversations that we're having about vulnerability, about kindness, about I, thou, and then me being a restorative practitioner and campaigner for restorative approaches. We use the saying justice with, not justice to or justice for people. It's about, yes, acknowledging that there needs to be boundaries in place and there needs to be expectations, but then it needs to be an equal measure of kindness and support if we are to create spaces which allow for human flourishing and the emergence of the human condition and capacity to love well, to learn to love well, to know how to feel connections, to not feel marginalized and isolated and discriminated against. And I don't do as much work in prisons as I do anymore, but I think the conversations, and we'll touch on this in a bit later in the workshop, about those pockets of the future that were touched on in the last workshop, and we're going to build up in the panel discussion later today, was making me think about where I can see those, where I can identify those in the community as well, and just how much I think what you just said then, Alison, about the normal is where the extraordinary emerges. That's not exactly the ordinary is where the extraordinary emerges. And it really is so mundane, this stuff that we're talking about. And it's beautiful at the same time. And I guess, for me personally, I was in, and I'm actually going to break my anonymity right now, but I'm in recovery. I'm a recovering addict, and I was in a meeting yesterday, fellowship meeting, and I was just like, that is the best example of kind of when you are in fellowship with people, you can be vulnerable. There are strangers in the room that tell you things that not even their own families know, and the trust and the connection that's there and the conditions for people to get well. And the same applies with addiction. The addiction is pain management. Substance abuse is pain management, and you talked a lot about pain becoming beauty, Alison, and connection is kind of what the word I left with from the last workshop. Although we're all gathered around the world here today, we are connected virtually, and we want to create more spaces, more pockets in the future within our prisons and across our estates where that connection can flourish and thrive. And what can happen when we come together and have those connections? And for me, the biggest thing, the most crazy experience that I've literally just come from was I was on a stage at the Victoria and Albert Hall 2 weeks ago, accepting an award at the Olivier Awards, which, for those of you that don't know, is like the Oscars of the theatre world, accepting the best new play for Punch. And I thought that for the industry, for the artistic theatre industry to recognise a story about justice, a story about human connection, a story about restorative justice and about humanness, was kind of, yes, I had to pinch myself and realize that is a pocket of the future that is now being recognized mainstream. And I feel extremely grateful for that, because that emerged from real pain, but has been turned into something of real beauty. And the legacy that show is going to have, and the conversation that's stimulating nationally and trying to move the dial towards a more human justice system. But simultaneously, yesterday, to present the juxtaposition that I think you represented so nicely, Alison, in the I, thou, and I, it. I've written down IE and I put like risk, and I put systems, and I put policy, and I put management, and then thou, I've got relational, vulnerable, human. And although these beautiful moments happen of connection and they exist everywhere because they are in the ordinary every day, even the most punitive, harshest of systems allows for pockets of beauty and human connection. And nobody can take that away from us. And I think our last week's panelists illustrated that beautifully, whether it's Javel, Terrell, people working in the justice system, lived experience leaders, all talked about, even in the most harshest of situations, with the bleakest of glimmer of hope, they all found moments of humanness that kept them going and finding hope. But and we also talked last week about how do we prevent burnout in our industry? How do we stay connected in our industry and find fellowship in our industry and have hope towards a new way forward? And I think this is hopefully what this workshop is contributing towards doing, and all the other fellowship programs out there that kind of bond us together to prevent that burnout. But I experienced burnout yesterday, and I have been lobbying the government off the back of all the success of the Play Punch. And for those of you that don't know, I'm not going to get into it because I haven't got enough time, but please do just Google Punch or Jacob Dunne. And we've been lobbying the government here in the UK to widen access to restorative justice, to give more access to victims, to access restorative justice, and to give them information about restorative justice. And we've made huge successes, and more referrals are coming in to take part in restorative justice. But at the same time, there's a little tiny department in the Ministry of Justice that have centralized managing risk of restorative justice and centralized managing the risk of perpetrators of crime being able to have contact with victims of crime, to have a dialogue. And the waiting lists have been long for victims. They've been becoming re-victimized. Perpetrators aren't having the opportunity to contribute, to be accountable, to try and repair the harm, to feel better about themselves. And this is all happening because a small group of people in the civil service have seen that there is the potential for risk of allowing these human connections to take place. And so what our systems do in it realm is they try to mitigate that risk, to eliminate it as much as possible. And that's meant that they've now introduced, this isn't public, but call me a whistleblower, they are now making a presumption against specific crime types, so that no one with domestic violence, manslaughter like myself, any other specific crime types will no longer be eligible for restorative justice moving forward, which is a huge step backwards and quite deflating, because the opportunity that I had to take part in restorative justice will no longer be eligible for other people going forward. But I have an award and a setback, but I'm taking one day at a time. I'm staying connected with people who are passionate about this work, and I remain optimistic that we can emphasize the need for more human justice systems, and that is the way forward. And there are many strategies in which we can all argue that case. And I look forward to, working with as many or as little of you as possible in what we're all doing to chip away at the arguably dehumanizing system that we have, and to move it towards a more human justice system. I've gone over but we are okay. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the workshop and spending time with you all, and look forward to where we're at the end.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jacob. And I think, on behalf of everybody, just a massive congratulations for the Olivier Award and all the work that you're doing, not only showing the play in theatres across, the UK and in the US, but also I know you've got a tour of schools, special edition of the play that's going to do a schools tour. So yeah, reaching all those different corners and all the pockets. And as someone who's worked in policy for many, many years, yeah, I know how those moments feel when you've been working on something where all the evidence is there, but everything seems to be lining up, and then it doesn't come into fruition. But yeah, have faith in the bigger picture, I think, in terms of all the incredible work that you're doing, and those changes will come. But as you said, it's an example of these things that can get in the way, the bureaucracy and inflexibility being one of those sort of barriers in the way. And I'm sure we'll kind of be unpicking that later on as well in our discussions.